Welcome to another episode of E360 Tech Sessions Podcast. I'm Al Solorzano, and I'm here with special guest today, Troy Couch, and we're going to be talking about Citrix Flex. So let's get started, Troy. Citrix Flex just got announced a couple of months ago. Yeah. So for organizations that are hearing about Citrix Flex for the first time, how would you describe it, maybe in business terms, and why did Citrix introduce it?
Oh, good question, Al. Well, Citrix Flex is really a shift from their traditional VDI model to really hosted desktops as a service for Citrix. And they really brought this up as really a shift from traditional licensing to a more flexible consumption model. And as a lot of these hosted VDI solutions have matured, Citrix is really at the forefront of delivering the solution. The change also allows organizations to try to align their costs with actual needs and really gets us again into that consumption model as we are seeing it is being adopted more and more by businesses.
So, maybe let's talk about why it was introduced. Is there something that changed within customer preferences? What changed that kind of drove Citrix Flex to be developed?
Well, a big change that happened in the industry, obviously, is with some hyperscalers and becoming more expensive, as well as just customers looking at cloud adoption. So with Citrix, they found an opportunity to present customers with a all-in-one model to where they get their VDI hosted as well as the management capabilities. And so as to why it was coming up, it really found a place in the market that made sense for their customers. So as they move forward, it's going to really support that modern workforce better than where their customers were at before.
Yeah, I also saw that when I'm talking to customers about Flex, some of the conversations are coming around persona management. We'll talk about that. From personas, as we're kind of I'll just talk about it right now. How about that? When we talk about persona management, we're talking about different use cases, right? There's some use cases that are on premises, some use cases that might be better for cloud suited architecture, better suited for enterprise browser. So maybe talk about persona management a little bit.
So when you get into personas and persona management, you really are trying to find that use case that fits for a specific workflow that a user is doing and a user themselves. So with Citrix and Flex, they've developed now multiple personas to choose from that help simplify that deployment for the users. So you might have a task-based worker, a power user, possibly administrators that all might need different resources delivered to them. So with Citrix's persona-based mappings, it really helps to kind of narrow it down on what you need to deliver and provide those users with a robust solution that meets what they need to do for their jobs.
Yeah, I think the personas is really what is driving customers to have conversations, right? They have a lot of pain points in their organization. They're struggling with some of their solutions today. And personas is kind of step one, I think, in this conversation. So in our next question, let's talk about that. So what business challenges or even operational pain points does Citrix Flex solve in the organization that customers are commonly struggling with today?
Well, I think one, if we just look at overall cloud and customers that might already be deployed in the cloud with the VDI solution and running their workloads on Azure, AWS, GCP, you can get into, depending upon how the users work, that can be a very expensive solution as it runs. So what Citrix has done with the Flex is really provide a method for to be driven by usage. So now as companies are paying more or having users try to do more and not being able to keep up, this now allows them to look at what they've got, not overbuy or underutilize their environment. They now can specifically key it to the personas they're needing, give it to the users, and have really a consumption-based model in Citrix Flex that you're only going to pay for what you use. So I think that is a key driver as a challenge for companies that have really been in the cloud already, is seeing those costs skyrocket at times when they haven't really figured out the right persona or how their users work. And we see this with other customers that come to us after their initiative they've done to roll out a cloud solution or roll out their desktops in the cloud. and finally understanding that they have maybe some users that need 24/7 access to a desktop. Others might only need a few hours a day based on how they do their work. So in the new Flex model, it definitely helps with those pain points around oversubscriptions or even underutilization of environments.
Yeah, I think Flex is appropriately named for its flexibility.
It's flexible. Yeah,
It's
agreed.
flexible. And one of the things I see too when I'm having conversations is, with hardware being as expensive as it is these days, with RAM prices and everything else, customers are looking for alternative options, right? How are they going to then consume the cloud? Are they even ready for the cloud? I think Flex kind of addresses that, like you already talked about with some of the hyperscaler capability. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to go into there about maybe what it can do for customers going into the cloud?
Well, when you're going in the cloud, this is going to really help by establishing a baseline for what you need to run and getting it in a model to where you can really start seeing what your consumption is and account accordingly for it as in your plans. So when you're moving in that direction, the way Flex is built really gives that visibility into those workloads and what the people are actually doing in the environment. It's how it all gets consumed and how it all gets paid for at the end. A bigger piece of this as well when you cloud and moving around from, whether on-prem or you're already in cloud, you get into, something that's really kicked companies in the before is seasonal workers, burst capacity, M&A possibly. So you get into some of those examples of what customers are doing, and Flex now provides that rapid expansion, rapid growth platform that they can jump to without really increasing their overall maybe cloud architecture to account for more desktops or even their on-prem hypervisor environment just to account for seasonal users. So again, Flex, not only for people in cloud, but on-prem really provides that, I'll say, agile environment for their customers to adopt and really get more people working in a way that works for the business.
And I think the flexibility of cloud for the workloads that get VDI workloads that do get moved into the cloud, you don't have to be a cloud expert, right? Because it is delivering
Correct.
those as DAS, as desktops as a service. And that capability means you don't have to have that expertise. You don't have to build a landing zone. You don't have to understand the networking and architecture. It's just kind of already so much provided for you. And you just got to connect the parts for identity and for the network cross connect, right? So those are benefits there.
Yep.
So let's keep talking about big
Agreed.
benefits. What are some of the other benefits that you're seeing that customers that are starting to adopt the Citrix Flex solution?
Well, I can say the time to deployment is pretty quick. So as you're getting through it now, whereas we had to go through a lot of iterations, sometimes in a customer environment to build out images or right size things based on users, with the Flex platform now being persona based, I identify certain personas I want to use, establish a base image for them, and really allow that Citrix Flex model to take over and start now delivering those desktops to those users based on what they need. Another piece that gets it aside from just speed to deliver is that I call it improved efficiencies as you're going through it, as you mentioned, Al, that cloud expertise you don't really need to have. This really just becomes another environment that's running desktops just like anywhere else you would do it. And since you don't have to worry about the underlying compute, it's really simplifies it for those admins on what they're using. So again, that simplifying those capabilities of getting them into the cloud, sometimes even for the first time on the Flex platform, lowers that barrier and some of that fear factor for those admins as well.
Yeah, I think another benefit that I'm going to see from customers is the just kind of faster ability to adapt to changing workforces, right? So
Yeah.
instead of buying X number of licenses of an enterprise browser and Y number of licenses for your virtual apps and desktop solution, that consumption credit model is going to allow you to burst up and down based upon the credits that
Yep.
you've received. And that could include also how you're consuming the cloud, right? Whether you're consuming smaller instances initially and then you need to increase those or vice versa, decrease those. I think that flexibility is going to be important for customers because there is a constant changing, right? Hey,
Yeah.
these applications are moving to the web. I need more enterprise browser. These applications are staying more client server, and now more people need to have access to them. And but I don't want to build out the infrastructure for those components. So that really quick
Oh, yeah.
ability to adapt to changing workforce demands, I think, is going to be pretty critical. That is unique amongst the solutions that are out there because most other solutions typically are you buying X of this, Y of this, and you're locked in. This flexibility is, I think, is going to be pretty important.
I definitely agree. The increase in business responsiveness speed is key. Meaning that, as something comes in, if they already have this platform deployed or even looking to deploy it, it becomes a very, fast to solve uh, platform. So if I've got something come in, I need it today, tomorrow. Flex allows me to really get this going quicker. With again, you still have to have an image or some basics to make it happen, but overall, the speed and simplicity of getting Flex stood up really helps with businesses respond to those needs quicker.
So then, as we're kind of talking to our customers about Flex, what outcomes are kind of sort of exciting them the most these days?
Ooh, um, I'd probably say that, this biggest thing we get is that persona mapping and really having it simplified for those admins. So now that it's broken down into, certain what we used to call t-shirt sizes that the users are fitting into, it takes some of the guesswork out about how they're having to build and deploy and really sets it now to where a user fits a certain persona. They know exactly where that fits for the desktop and off they go to deliver it.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. So when I talk to some of our customers around what they're going to achieve in the future with Flex, some of the things I hear are they want to have operational simplicity, right? So maybe just talk about architecturally, Troy, kind of talk about what is Flex? What's included with Flex? And give me a couple of ideas and concepts so somebody can understand the basics of it.
All right. Well, Citrix Flex, essentially, if we're talking, we'll say Citrix terminology, is your established resource location or zone that's running all of your VDAs. So from a architectural standpoint, it would be that part of your data center or cloud environment that is specifically just set aside to host your virtual desktops. Everything else is managed by you as the customer through Citrix console that should be familiar with, or if not, pretty easy to learn. All the same methods that were used in a on-prem or cloud deployment for Citrix still are relevant for a Citrix Flex deployment. So really that admin ramp up is negligible. And, as you mentioned, some of that cost as well of a benefit where some businesses had some unknowns, especially in some of those other um, cloud solutions for virtual desktops. And that would lead to spikes in billing that were unknown or undecided, not aware that they were coming in.
They were not prepared for that extra zero at the end of their bill.
Correct. It went from, hey, 1,000 to 10,000, and no one had awareness as it hit that bump. So it's that now, knowing you have the tokens on the back end, how it's getting consumed, better model, better visibility. That really at the end is what the customers are going to get out of this deployment of Flex. It's going to be more cost effective usually than a straight cloud deployment managed right. And visibility into how it's being consumed is key. I hear the horror stories. Users that have access will let things run or have their desktops, normally should be power cycled. They'll leave them on for weeks at a time and eat up that consumption and increase the costs when they were expected to only be, let's say, a 9 to 5 worker. So with this token based and the personas and the way it's mapped, you're going to have a lot of that visibility now to know how it's being handled, and with the power management, really be able to control how those users are consuming that cloud spend.
Yeah, I think another thing I hear from customers that they're excited about is just that improved user experience and knowing that they're getting the right solution with Flex. So because VDI is not the right answer for everybody, right?
Correct.
Customers are excited to hear that enterprise browser is one of the options
Yep.
within Flex, along with the secure private access capabilities. And those concepts allow for a organization to give the right solution and the right experience for the right use case, right? And not everybody needs to have VDI. Some people can get away with an enterprise
Correct.
browser. Some people just need secure private access for their local applications. And that kind of ability to flex, as they would like to keep using that term, allows the organization to figure out that right use case, right experience, and kind of have that one solution that addresses all of the use cases, as opposed to the one size fits all model, which usually doesn't always work.
Exactly. And that's where you're taking it from not only providing a virtual desktop, you can do virtual applications, as you mentioned, the enterprise browser, secure private access models as well. So again, it really gives that totality of solutions you can now present your users for how they work. And at the end of the day, it's still going to follow the same consumption model with Citrix. So you're going to be able to manage exactly how much the users are um, costing and really drive to that value of what Flex can bring. The right size, the right solution.
So, from a technical perspective, what else do you think makes Flex different from traditional Citrix deployments that customers are traditionally used to?
I would say the biggest difference is really around that persona mapping, Al. Everything else that we get into from a Citrix world is still relevant, still the same in the Flex environment. So that's the adoption for your existing Citrix shops. Really is going to be pretty low threshold for increasing your knowledge to be proficient. Um, and that's the biggest one. Now, the other part also is that visibility piece. And, with Flex, you're going to really start seeing what the users are doing, performance of everything within the environment, and that visibility into what users are doing with what you've provided. So are they using the desktops, as long as you expected, longer, shorter? Um, Applications, do you find that they run a desktop and are just running one application in the desktop? That can now be mapped to a maybe different persona for just a published application. Or if it's SaaS based, maybe that's enterprise browser at that point. So as you get into, where some of those differences are, uh, that's really the biggest pieces. Again, cost modeling, a little bit more able to determine that what you set is what you're going to pay up to a certain degree, and really have that without a fear that you're going to look at the bill next month and it's going to be way over what you expected in other um, virtual desktop solutions out there.
Got it. I hear a lot around in this solution, what we're trying to provide is a technology that supports all strategies, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's hybrid, multi-cloud, on premises, we're going full enterprise browser, we're going full VDI, we're going full, traditional endpoint modeling. Plus, we need a monitoring solution. What I hear from customers is they're excited around Flex from a technical side because it addresses all of those strategies. That sometimes IT, buys a solution and has to force everybody into it,
Yep.
or the strategy is set and they go, oh, well, we're going to have to force everybody into a particular technology because the strategy is dictating it. This kind of feels like it's a little bit of both, right? It addresses the business side of being flexible from a strategy perspective, but also providing the technical tools to allow that flexibility when the strategy changes. So I guess my question for you is, do you find that valuable when we're talking to our customers?
Oh, tremendously. Especially with, as we've all been in it before, some part of the business will come to you with new requirements that you have to address, most likely security at that point. And if you already are invested in solutions and working, it's sometimes very hard to then pivot or expand that solution if you already have your licenses paid for and you now are looking at um, maybe an increase in license cost for an existing solution you might have in-house. Other vendors might be knocking at the door trying to get you to take a look at their product. So when you're working through it and see all the availability that Citrix provides with their solution, you can now start taking it and adjust as it comes. So if you get a new requirement, you can adapt with Flex to, okay, we need to increase how much consumption we're going to have in enterprise browser because of a new requirement by security for accessing this SaaS-based application. Perfect. Whereas before, if you were in a standard, you know, Citrix DAS licensing that didn't have that solution as part of it, you might not start looking now at third party or other vendors that might provide that. And because you weren't in a license renewal cycle with Citrix,
Yeah.
that now becomes the standard conversation that's happening instead of, oh, well, Citrix has a solution for that. Let's just talk to them some more about it. So I think with Flex, knowing that it's really a platform for delivering all those different options is going to be very good for customers to look at and see that, hey, I get a new requirement presented to me. I now have options to deliver it within this platform itself, and I can adjust as needed. And it's not going to be as big of an uplift as, hey, let's have a license conversation, increase count, co-term, all these other things that go in when you have to adjust solutions like that. So I think that in itself is going to be a big win on how customers consume the Flex.
Yeah, and it doesn't require it to be at a renewal event. It can be
Correct. Yeah.
midterm, things like that too. Okay.
Yep.
So we already talked about how the solution is kind of sort of built on existing platforms that Citrix has had, right? This is not like brand new technology. It's just a couple of modifications and changes to the way they were architecting it and kind of integrating multiple solutions together. But I'm sure customers are still going to want to evaluate or have some discussions early on around Citrix Flex. So what would you recommend they pay close attention to?
Ooh, I'd say the ones that are seeing the most value really aren't starting with technology. They're really starting with understanding their users and business
Tied
objectives
to
and
persona mapping.
yeah, and how that all is coming, to fruition in their environment. Because at the end of the day, it's all down to, are the users able to do their jobs? Are they productive? Um, does technology support them in doing their jobs? And once you understand really what the users are doing, their business objectives in their daily day, you can now start mapping that back to the technology that makes the most sense. And with Flex, you have those options around, as we said, full desktop, applications, browser, private access. All those capabilities are there under one platform.
Makes sense. So if an organization believes that Citrix Flex might be a solution for them, what should they do next? Where do they start?
If they want to start looking at it, I think the first real piece that we talk to our customers about is again gets back to understanding their users and really the use cases that would be modeled for going into Flex. As we've all, through the years, not everybody, not every user fits in a certain box. Maybe that Flex can solve 80 to 90% of the user problems, but you still have a little bit left to solve elsewhere. But what it's going to allow is really that ability to look at it as a totality of how do you help your users, do their jobs. And once you understand what their jobs are, that's where all the magic happens on getting into Flex. The architecture again is really just bolting on an environment to run the desktops, but without knowing really what your users are doing and what their requirements are for their jobs, you're going to be running into any issues around maybe integrations, connectivity from their desktop for application for specific things. So it's really that user side is the biggest part that you need to understand before jumping into Flex.
Yeah, and a persona management engagement is not difficult. Potentially can even be funded by Citrix, right? So that's an
Yeah,
important piece.
that's a good
I think
one.
there's some simple things too that Citrix admin can look at, right? If you're just looking at your current Citrix infrastructure and looking at, say, how many times you've published a web browser, right? Where you're like, hey, I published a web app because somebody asked me to. Citrix became the
Yeah,
easy button is my joke for publishing a new application, getting an application out to users very quickly.
yeah,
But now it's consuming a bunch of infrastructure and somebody's looking at the dollar figures and saying, wow, VDI is expensive. And you're like, well, no, it's because we threw a whole bunch of stuff that didn't have to be there, but we
yeah,
put it there. So that persona management is definitely part of it. But I think even just simply looking at how many web apps are you publishing in the organization, right? Because that's an
yeah,
easy conversation that my guess is customers are having as an enterprise browser strategy as the future, especially as more applications go to the web, right, and become more SaaS-based solutions, and trying to provide that level of control. You want that control, right? The control that VDI has about delivering a web app, you want that same control when it's on the physical desktop, right, or even on the coming from a mobile device. So I think that's just an easy conversation. And strategically speaking, I think that's what a lot of organizations are looking at as a heavy cost around VDI is what are the things that are there that didn't have to be there, right?
yeah.
So browser is a good example. I think
Great.
every organization has some sort of ZTNA or VPN strategy. So same thing, kind of looking at like what's the strategy there? Is the goal to make all of the endpoints trusted, or is it the goal to make them trusted but protected and isolated with like a ZTNA that a Citrix secure private access can provide? So definitely some small things to not only technically do, like you said, Troy, but maybe even just kind of align to what the business strategy is. So that way
Yep.
the business can get impacted by some of the solutions that you're looking at with Citrix.
100% agree. Yeah, and I think one piece that is really hot out there, obviously, is the AI. And one piece that Flex can come in for that is providing a secure workspace for people to use those AI tools. So I know people have looked at, oh, we just push it out and people are on the endpoint and we're managing how they're consuming AI at the endpoint. But you talk Flex and can now create a controlled environment that all of the business approved AI tools are in that desktop. And even if you weren't a Citrix shop before, it now is a method of enabling those users to have that safe space, and you're not having to fork out a bunch of infrastructure internally, worry about extra, cloud subscriptions for yourself. It now gives you that burst again to put a specific use case up in the cloud. And even some of those I know with secure browsers have web platforms you can use. So it really ties it all together. And I think AI is a big persona use case that might be overlooked in some areas, but Flex fits it for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Whether you're deciding to use your own solutions and tooling to build your AI and
Yeah.
using a virtual desktop to do that, or you're using it as a consumer where you're just going directly to the websites and wanting to control what data is being uploaded, downloaded, where it's being downloaded to, and how copy and paste even functions, right? So enterprise
Yeah.
browser
Yeah.
comes in quite often there. Okay.
Yes.
I think
Great.
as you're wrapping it up, right? I think what we're trying to say is like the value from Flex really isn't starting with the technology because the technology's always been there. It's
Yep.
really understanding the users, the use cases, their business objectives, and understanding how flexible do you need to be in IT to align to those goals of the organization. And I think Citrix Flex kind of hits a home run on that one in my 2 cents.
Agreed. Definitely does.
So that wraps up today's session. Thank you very much, Troy, for participating.
Hey, glad to be here, Al.